Welcome to my digital life. All ones, all zeros, and no excuses. I'm not even wearing pants. The reviews are in, and episode 1 was a modest success. Though considering some of the topics that I touched on, not one without a small bit of, admittedly expected, controversy. No doubt the more perceptive among my viewers picked up on a small, but important detail from the previous episode, and I have no doubts whatsoever that all three of them are asking themselves the same question. Wait a minute, even if you are older than dirt, and you clearly are, how the hell is it possible for you to have managed a single YouTube channel, let alone multiple YouTube channels over the past 25 years or thereabouts, when it's not even a 20-year-old service as of the time of your video's publication? Which means that either my memory is failing me in my old age, or perhaps I've been too generous in rounding up the perception and wisdom stats on my audience's character sheets. And yes, I know those aren't mutually exclusive. Fuck off, I'm trying to make a point. Clearly, when people hear the word channel in the context of the internet, YouTube, that bastion of all things horrible that's managed by a baker's gaggle of useless fuckwits, is the default place our minds will wander toward. Whether that's familiarity or Stockholm Syndrome is still being investigated by medical science. But what if I were to tell you that there were such things as places for online media before 2005, when YouTube extracted its slimy, pustule-ridden form from the primordial muck of the web, and proceeded to get some of it all over the rest of us? Strap on, boys, girls, and all points in between, because Dr. Scientist is going to fire up the time machine to take you on an abridged tour of the history of my digital life so we can put things in their proper context to fully explore the madness of the method. The first computers I remember using on a regular basis were the Tandy TRS-80 systems that were in what would laughably be called a computer lab in my old elementary school. Home computing in the mid to late 1980s, yes 80s, 80, shut up, was wicked expensive for the average Joe and Jane workforce, so the computer lab at school was my first taste of computing, even if most of that computing was done moving a pixelated turtle inside of Logo, and spending hours perfecting designs that I could have easily replicated in the physical space in about a tenth of the time with a spirograph and a set of pencil crayons. Thankfully, not long after our school's fledgling, computer science program got underway, my older brother dipped into his own savings and bought a brand new Tandy 1000 desktop computer, by which I mean a computer system that literally covered the entirety of my brother's desk to the point where we needed to jerry-rig a keyboard shelf to be able to actually type commands into this damn thing. The Tandy, that being the one that my brother owned and not the Tandy systems at school, introduced me to three things. 1. My love of PC gaming. 2. My love of programming and coding, as back in those days the most efficient way to game on a PC was to copy the game code out of a programming guide and compile the game yourself and hope you didn't make a typo somewhere along the way. And finally 3. My love of cheat codes for PC games, as you could just adjust variables along the way when transcribing code from print to computer and make games wickedly easy, or completely change the flavor text for comedic effect. Because we can all agree that nothing spices up a space battle between the United Space Alliance and the evil Cobalt Force than firing your main ion cannon and dealing 50 damage directly to the opposing fleet admiral's scrotum, complete with a full-text description of exactly how much agonizing pain the poor bastard was put through, while my friends and I laughed our asses off like the immature dipshits that we were. Sadly, my career as a future writer of juvenile space adventures would have to be put on hold for several years as my brother moved out, taking his computer along with him. At least Sierra was still making new Space Quest games. It would be another few years before I'd have some money of my own saved up to pick up a used 386 system and learn all about exactly how frustrating it could be to upgrade an old PC, as the then new era of sound cards, video accelerator cards and CD-ROM drives also ushered in the era of IRQ conflicts, driver incompatibilities, and the ever-popular optimizing of the autoexec.bat and config.sys files for hours on end every time you wanted to play a new game. I eventually managed to get my system upgraded to the point where I could run my favorite games at reasonably playable frame rates just in time for the Pentium era to come along and bury my computer's dick in the dirt. Never one to keep up with the Joneses, because PC hardware was still wicked expensive, I waited out the storm and eventually used my student loan money to build a top-shelf computer system as I was starting to study IT in college, by which I mean I was going to learn how to use such cutting-edge technology such as Turbo Pascal, Lotus 123, and WordPerfect for MS-DOS 6.2. You know, all that timeless and contemporary software that's still industry standard and used by literally everyone who even thinks about computers on the daily in 2022. Of course, my system had its own share of anachronistic jank as it was using both Cyrix and ATI processors, which is something that would completely bite me in the ass in a year or so, but it allowed me to be a little more forward-looking in my personal software choices as I started working with early versions of Linux, as well as Windows NT 4, which would go on to be the foundation of all Windows-based operating systems to this day. In fact, when I took my PC tower in for a hard drive upgrade, I blew the tech's mind when he saw that I was running a fully functional triple boot system with Red Hat, Windows NT 4 and Windows 95. It was also about this time that I was making some decent coin on the freelance market teaching Mac users how to use their own Macs in spite of the tiny detail of not actually owning a Mac at the time or even having used Macs outside the context of showing people how to use their own Macs. But as this is a Mac story that will get a lot more attention in future episodes about Macs, I'll just ask you all to put a pin in this for now. I had also shifted my focus from coding in BASIC, Pascal and the occasional foray into C++ toward more contemporary scripting languages such as HTML and JavaScript. And while neither of those newer scripting languages were going to make me the next great killer application developer or game designer, the money I made from building websites for all of my dad's friends who owned small businesses during the dot-com boom certainly helped wipe away the tears from not fulfilling my dreams, as I left college having essentially learned absolutely nothing of consequence that I would be able to use in my professional life. So basically, like literally anything else people learn in college, some things never change. And it's at this point that most of you who haven't already nodded off, or tabbed over to Pornhub to do your own laptop testing, as a control test against my own performance numbers, are probably wondering when this is going to get even remotely interesting, or be even tangentially related to the question of social media and creating media of my own for online publication. My answer, aside from stating the obvious and factual information that making a short story long is something that I'm incredibly good at, is that it's coming, but like any story needs some setup time. That may sound like a stretch, but at my age I want to make sure I don't pull anything when throwing down during the thick of things once the story gains some momentum. As it turns out, once I left college and started getting more into freelancing, the world entered the era of the MP3, as the music compression format started to gain some serious popularity and near ubiquity online in spite of music labels, publishing companies and Metallica trying to ruin everyone's fun. And it was this near ubiquity that would lead to the rise of MP3.com. Now for those of you who still weren't a warm damp stain on the bedsheets because your old man's pull-out game was literal weak sauce, and your mom was too much of a prude to go anal or swallow, MP3.com wasn't always a home for bullshit clickbait articles and quizzes that could be aced by the clinically brain dead. At the height of its popularity and arguably its cultural relevance, it allowed independent artists to upload their own material and effectively self-publish their own music, spoken word, or anything else that could be recorded and distributed as an MP3 audio file. No record label, indie, or otherwise required. Even better was that the popularity of MP3.com led to a boom in online outlets to upload your audio creativity. Sites such as IUMA and a pre-Apple GarageBand not only allowed you to post your music online, but also sell your music as physical CDs for anyone who was interested in buying them, effectively allowing you to be your own music label. GarageBand.com even had a full-on review system, complete with its own Billboard-style charts for each genre, as well as a global chart. Reviewers themselves were rated for their fairness by a separate independent review process, meaning budding music critics could hone their chops in the hopes of someday turning volunteer reviews into freelance gigs with established media outlets. It probably never happened that way, but I'd imagine it at least helped to kickstart the proliferation of independent music blogs that are still going strong to this day. I mean, it's a possibility is what I'm saying. Back in those days, it was really cool posting a new edition of my online web zine on a Friday night, uploading a bonus MP3 track to the comedy section of all the MP3 sites I frequented, and then watching the numbers roll in over the next few days, and even see where my individual tracks as well as my channel would chart for that week. And yes, I'm the first to admit it wasn't industry recognized that I reached as high as the 7th most popular comedy artist in Australia, and sounds suspiciously like someone claiming to have a Canadian girlfriend, but it gave me the warm fuzzy feelings in all the right places, and helped me hone my comedic writing for when YouTube would become a viable space for me to start uploading just before the start of the 2010s. And just when the fun was kicking into high gear and everyone was finally realizing the potential of leveraging the web for making money in a creative way, that's when Metallica had to go and fuck everything up. Then they had to go and make things even worse by releasing their sonic atrocity Saint Anger and presumably subsequently threatening to automatically upload copies of the album to everyone who once used Napster as punishment for pirating music. It sounds like something they would have done at the time. But while the fun lasted and before Metallica got their drum sound from 3-year-olds banging on pots with wooden spoons, MP3.com and their various imitators were places where I could upload all of my weird sketch comedy ideas that I would record with my friends on an old cassette 4-track system, and then mix down to my old Toshiba laptop for upload. And as all of this was happening before the turn of the millennium in the mid to late 90s, this is how I get to the magic number of 25 years or so posting stuff online. Math, bitches. Sadly, for those of you who were hoping to hear the dulcet tones and comedy stylings of some young guy named Rob, none of my older recordings are still around in spite of my dumpster dives through archive.org to try and find something I just couldn't bring back with the time machine. Digital rot and lost or damaged hard drives effectively wiped out any local copies of my old material, and all of the sites I used to frequent were either bought out or went bankrupt once the dot-com bubble finally collapsed in the early part of the 2000s. My early YouTube years are equally lost, as the use of licensed music tracks led to a lot of video takedowns and even entire channels I've been a part of being completely shut down when YouTube had their massive crackdown on the use of copyrighted material. And no, they weren't any better in terms of recognizing fair use as protected speech back then either. Then as now, the idiot brigade in charge of enforcing the rules were not so much asleep at the wheel as much as they were making the types of logical decisions one would make, chasing double doses of Valium down with a fifth of vodka following several consecutive instances of severe head trauma. Or having listened to Saint Anger unironically. Needless to say, Metallica can fuck all the way off.